All right, guys. So the two major acquisition periods in the NFL is free agency and the NFL draft, and both of them are now over. In my last video, I went over really the defensive additions because that seems to be the most exciting part about this offseason was how stacked our defense looks to be. And in this video, I want to go into what the offense is going to look like because, while maybe the defense was a little bit splashier, the offense also had a lot of pretty good additions as well. The Jaguars spent a lot of money in free agency, and really free agency was kind of where the offense got a lot better. They got a little bit of love in the NFL draft, but most of it did come from free agency. Now, the Jaguars offense in 2021 was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. Urban Meyer was probably the worst coach in NFL history, and just having him meddle around in the offense made the offense a lot worse than it probably would have been under a decent coaching staff. And it probably impaired a little bit about what guys like Darrell Bevell were doing, offensive passing game coordinator Brian Schottenheimer, and then just all of the different position coaches, because Urban Meyer was pretty unfair and pretty cruel to all of them, and it was just really, really bad. And really, if there was anything that was going to tell us what the future of the Jaguars offense was going to be in 2021, it was week 1 against the Houston Texans. The Jaguars that game had Trevor Lawrence throw the ball 51 times. They had Carlos Hyde rush the ball 9 times and James Robinson only 5 times. And they committed 9 offensive penalties. Now, what this says is that they put way too much on Trevor Lawrence. 51 pass attempts for Trevor Lawrence, his very first game as an NFL quarterback, following a whole entire training camp where they were giving half of the starting reps to Gardner Minshew, who they wound up just trading him for a bag of peanuts. And it also kind of gave us a little foreshadowing as to the underutilization of James Robinson and just the fascination that they had for Carlos Hyde, particularly Urban Meyer, who coached Carlos Hyde back in college at Ohio State. And finally, just the penalties, all over the place for the Jaguars. And if you want to go even deeper into how bad it was, let's go into the very first drive of that very first game. The game started out with an illegal formation on offense. Now, you can argue about, okay, it's a holding call. Okay, is that a holding call on the coaching? Is it the player? Who's it on? You can have that debate. But an illegal formation, the very first play of the NFL season, when the start of the seasons, and even every game, they're scripted drives. What the first 8, 9, 10 plays look like. They're all scripted. And you go out there and throw an illegal formation out there, very first play. So to back this up into a 1st and 15, and as the play clock was winding down, the Jaguars had to call timeout. The offense was not prepared on a 1st and 15, the very first play. It was absolutely terrible. And then obviously, they didn't convert the first down and they had to punt. So that was just really, really bad. So really with the Jags this offseason, honestly, the subtraction of Urban Meyer and the addition of Doug Peterson is going to rapidly improve the Jaguars offense. Urban Meyer was a guy that had never coached in the NFL before, and Doug Peterson is a guy that literally 4 years ago won a Super Bowl. He's a very accomplished NFL coach, has, coached with the best of them with Andy Reid, and, he's been a former quarterback himself. He's an offensive play caller. You can see during a game he has a play sheet out. He's just extremely active as opposed to Urban Meyer with the hands on his knees looking down at the turf. So just that is going to improve the offense. And even Trevor Lawrence going into his second year as a quarterback. Trevor Lawrence, there was a lot put on him last year. Trevor Lawrence had to basically be the PR guy for the Jaguars. He had to answer for all of the distractions brought on by the head coach. He was the guy that when Urban Meyer refused to put in James Robinson, the only guy that could talk some sense into Urban Meyer was Trevor Lawrence and said, get this guy back into the game. He was a guy that ultimately, reportedly, kind of tipped Shad Khan's hand to finally fire Urban Meyer. This was all put on a 21-year-old dude. Can you imagine? Can you imagine all that? So Trevor Lawrence going to his second year where he doesn't have to answer for all the distractions brought on by a head coach and just answer for things that aren't going on the football field is going to be extremely, extremely good for him. So, and also his camp really did like the Doug Peterson hiring. So just those two things. You can have the same exact offense from last year when it comes to the players, but bringing Trevor Lawrence into his second year and also just bringing in Doug Peterson, it makes that offense dramatically better. However, the Jaguars did do some work when it comes to adding to the offense. We'll start with the offensive line, the trenches. The Jaguars had a lot of additions and subtractions. You know, the defense, when we looked over the defense, it was pretty much just addition, addition, addition. And then you just kind of lost Miles Jack. And even losing Miles Jack, you feel like the guy that's replacing him is going to be better. On the offensive line, you lose guys like left guard Andrew Norwell, who had been with the Jaguars since 2018, a very high-priced guy. Not a fan favorite because he was probably overpaid, but you know, you lose a guy that started pretty much all the games that he played in. And also you lose center Brandon Linder to retirement. Another thing that they did was they did retain left tackle Cam Robinson. They franchise tagged him, then they were able to work in a 3-year deal for Cam Robinson. And then you also bring in high-priced right guard Brandon Sheriff, who is an all-pro, Pro Bowl player who really his only knack is the fact that he is oft injured. So hopefully he can play a complete season, but you know, he's a guy that really only plays 65 to 70% of, you know, his seasons, you know, the last several years. So when you look at what the Jaguars offensive line is going to look like, there's really only 3 positions that seem to be locked right now. One of them is Cam Robinson playing left tackle. You know, some people may argue, okay, maybe we move him to right tackle, maybe we do this. Well, look, Cam Robinson to me is a lock at left tackle. He is a 5-year NFL starter at left tackle, and he also played all his years at Alabama at left tackle. He did not re-sign with the Jaguars to move from left tackle, and also he doesn't deserve to be moved from left tackle. He had a pretty good season last year. Actually, I mean, he was the best offensive lineman. I'm not going to say he was like this super top-end guy, but, you know, solid starter. He deserves to be the left tackle. So he's going to be the left tackle, and also right guard Brandon Sheriff. He's locked in there. All-Pro, Pro Bowl player, great at his position, like I was saying earlier. And then one guy, I'm not going to lock him into a spot, but Walker Little, he is a top 5 offensive lineman on your team. You drafted him in the second round in 2021. He got better as the year went on, and he really ended the season on a high note. This guy needs to start somewhere, whether it be left guard or right tackle. I think he's going to start at right tackle for the Jaguars next year. I think he's going to transition into that spot. Of course, it's going to take a little bit of transition, but hey, what's a little transition going to do? So, you know, work him the whole entire offseason at right tackle and let him get acclimated. I'm sure this offseason they're communicating with him, work on your right tackle sets. OTA starts up pretty soon. I'd love to get reports about where exactly he is playing. So I'd be playing him at right tackle for sure. And then that leaves center and left guard up for grabs. Now, the Jaguars in the 3rd round drafted center/guard Luke Fortner. I would project him to start at center. He was a guy that played 2,300 passing reps in college and gave up 22 pressures and 5 sacks. So pretty good numbers coming off of a pretty good 2021 season that led to him getting drafted in a 3rd round. He has a nastiness to him. I do think that he is a day 1 starter at center. So that really leaves left guard. I mean, what are we going to do at left guard? I would say probably the guy that is probably leading for that role is left guard Ben Bartch. He is going to his 3rd year as an NFL pro. The Jaguars drafted him in 2020, and he was starting at right guard last year. Had a pretty good season, really did improve from rookie year to his 2nd year. I imagine he'll probably be at left guard. Some other guys up for the competition is, famous guy Tyler Shadley, who's been with the Jaguars for a while, playing mostly center after Brandon Linder had his annual injury where he'd start there. Also, some guys, maybe even Jawan Taylor. Jawan Taylor's going into the last year of his deal. He has some athletic ability in him, but he might need to probably switch positions as right tackle has been working out very well for him. I project I project Walker Little to be playing right tackle, so he's probably going to maybe transition to a guard position. And maybe even Will Richardson, who is a guy that's been on the Jags for a while, re-signed to kind of a small veterans deal. But the Jaguars did like him enough to retain him. So offensive line is going to be a lot different. We'll kind of see what it looks like in preseason. But as for whether it got better or worse, I'd say it probably got better, maybe a little bit. I mean, you add in an all-pro to your offensive line. You also get a guy going into his second year with Walker Little, who really sky should be the limit for him after he sat out for several years. And then, you have, a couple guys that will compete over there for that job. So we'll see with the offensive line. Next up is the running back position. Now, some additions, I would say Travis Etienne's addition, right? He didn't play any regular season games last year. And also you drafted Snoop Connor out of Ole Miss in the 5th round. The only subtraction is Jaguars villain Carlos Hyde. So definitely get stronger at this room. Now, this one is confusing because of the injuries. Now, obviously, Travis Etienne is coming off of a Liz Frank injury, and James Robinson is coming off of an Achilles injury. And these aren't like, broken ankle, he'll be back. ACL tear, where it's a pretty easy fix. Both of these are pretty touchy injuries. I mean, Liz Frank, sometimes players never come back the same. Sometimes players do. It just depends on, I guess, the injury, maybe even how quickly they diagnose it. Just a lot of stuff goes into it. And hopefully James Robinson went to the same doctor that Cam Akers went to after he returned extremely quickly. So we'll see, but I'm going to go into this assuming both guys come back really well. And I do think that Travis Etienne will probably be the most productive running back for the Jaguars, especially kind of with Doug Peterson's RPO type of system. I imagine as the coaching staff goes back and looks at Trevor Lawrence's film of what he does good and bad, I imagine they're going to be going back to a lot of the stuff that he did at Clemson to see what he does, and a lot of that is going to include Travis Etienne. So I imagine there's going to be a plan laid out for what that is going to look like. And then James Robinson, they do like to run a lot of multi-running back sets, so I do think James Robinson will be back there and will be productive, but I think this will be ultimately the Travis Etienne show going forward. And he has that speed, breakout speed. He's got just a lot of, go back and look at Travis Etienne's Clemson highlights. I mean, you look at that and go, man, we need that in this offense. So Travis Etienne coming back from injury, that should be good, and the running back room should hopefully be a lot better. Now, the next one I'm going to group together, that's tight ends and wide receivers, because ultimately these are going to be Trevor Lawrence's weapons that he is going to throw to and hopefully make some big plays and elevate his game. Now, the subtractions from the team, you lose DJ Chark, which is pretty significant. I know I wasn't a big DJ Chark guy, but you lose a big body. He once had a 1,000-yard season for the Jaguars. He's just kind of the guy that needs a fresh start. And then some guys that you added, you gave Christian Kirk a lot of money. You also gave Zay Jones a pretty decent amount of money too. And you also bring in Evan Ingram on a 1-year prove-it deal. Some guys that you're going to have return from injury, Dan Arnold and Jamal Agnew. And, some guys that you also have in the helm is Marvin Jones and Laviska Shenault. Now, all these guys should improve from what the Jaguars did last year. The wide receiver room, I mean, it just wasn't good last year. Just wasn't coached very well. No, wasn't a good group. And hopefully they do a lot better this year. I do really love the Christian Kirk addition. He's going to be playing probably mostly from the slot, but you can move him outside. But with a lot of this honestly is projection. And I get really hesitant on just projecting guys because I'd like to sit here and say, Zay Jones, he's going to do really good with the Jaguars. But is it smart to project a guy to do something that he hasn't done in his 6 years as an NFL vet? Even like Evan Ingram, it's like, he's on a 1-year prove-it deal for a reason. I do think having Trevor Lawrence play better will elevate these guys' play, but a lot of these guys, Honestly, I'm going to be in wait and see mode. I know I've been having some feedback. Oh, I've been negative after the draft, all this and that. But look, I've been beat up by the Jaguars, and I'm not really on here to really pump sunshine into the guys. I do try to provide things from a really optimistic standpoint because, I mean, I don't want to sit here and be down the whole time. Just, oh, this guy sucks. That sucks. I mean, I don't want to be that guy. I don't like being that guy. But at the same time, I'm going to keep it real with you guys. And I'm not going to sit here and say I hate these additions or anything, but I'm not going to project Zane Jones to get 11 touchdowns and 1,200 receiving yards, and Evan Ingram all of a sudden do haul in 14 touchdowns and get 6 to 7 receptions per game. I'm just not going to do that. I'm gonna let these guys prove it to me, And really, I wasn't happy that we didn't come away with really weapons in the draft, but at the same time, I don't know what I would have done differently to do that. I mean, I would have loved to have added a wide receiver in the second round, but man, I think Devin Lloyd's going to be a really, really good player. I literally think he's going to, in a few years, be like the best player at his position at middle linebacker. So I wouldn't have done that any differently. And obviously, you had a record number of wide receivers go in this NFL draft, and the Jaguars went aggressive in free agency. They brought in Christian Kirk and Zay Jones, spent a lot of money there, even bringing in Evan Ingram. The Jaguars, I mean, I wouldn't have overdrafted a wide receiver in a third round, especially after all that win. I'm not just going to draft the guy to draft the guy. That's not smart business in the NFL. That's not going to win you games. But I would say I may be a little bit disappointed in the way that the draft did fall for the Jaguars, but that's out of our control. You can't really control that. So, I think everybody will do better from the Jaguars offense just because, look, the defense might not have been as affected by Urban Meyer because I don't think Urban Meyer was really meddling around in the defense as much, but he was a guy that was holding back a lot of players, holding back, having Trevor Lawrence have to answer for him in press conferences, like not letting James Robinson go back into the game, and who knows what other stuff was going on. So just the movement from Urban Meyer to Doug Peterson will just be huge for the Jaguars offense, and Doug Peterson does a really good job of adjusting his scheme to what the Jaguar or to what a team's ability is, to the team's strengths. He's not going to say, this is my offense, you guys line up here, this is how I run my offense. No, they're going to do a deep dive about what this team can do, and they're going to do it that way. Also just plays, he's going to uses guys all over the field when it comes to a lot of versatility. I mean, I could see a guy like Evan Ingram being our X factor. I could see him lining up at, he's going to be just a big wide receiver. I don't really think he's going to be like an inline blocking tight end. So they're going to line him in the slot. They're going to line up on the outside. Hell, they might even bring him in. Actually, maybe not bring him in backfield, but I don't know. They're going to do a lot of different things, and hopefully they just do everything right because it's going to be a lot of fun. But we'll see what happens with the Jaguars, man. I know right now our over-under is set at 6.5 wins, which I know this is probably a discussion for a different video, but I really think with the addition of Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence in the second year, I think that gets you at least 3 more wins. It gets you from 3-14 to 6-11, and I say at least 7 wins in 2022 is the absolute floor for me to be happy with this team. And I really don't think that's asking much. Is 7-10 really asking a lot? Or you spend all this money on offseason, you bring in a really good coach, and you have a quarterback going into his second year? We'll see. Of course, we'll get into that later time, and maybe I should dive more into Trevor Lawrence at some point, but OTA starting up soon. We have a lot of time to talk about nothing. I mean, now like it's May, June and July are just so dead. So yeah, we'll man, I think like 3 months from now is the first preseason game. I'm recording this May 7th. You guys will see this May 8th. I believe the Hall of Fame game is like the first week of August. Man, we're right around the corner. All right, but we're getting off track. Thank you guys so much for watching. Drop a like for me if you guys can, and also join the Relevant app. We'll be doing a podcast over there with Tom McManus on Tuesday on their Jaguars Fanatics. Really hope to see you guys there. But with all that said, let me know what your guys' thoughts of this offense is, and go Jags. You guys watched the whole video. Really appreciate that. You guys can subscribe to the channel for the best source of Jaguars news on the YouTube platform. Also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at UCF_Jaguar. And you can become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month for exclusive channel content. Thank you guys, and go Jags.